Welcome to The Explainer. Today we're diving into a really pivotal moment in history, a time when a world completely shattered by war had to make a choice. A perilous choice between two very, very different futures. One of freedom and one of control.
So let's just jump right in, because the answer here, it's not just some old history lesson. It actually tells us a ton about what people really, really value when everything feels like it's falling apart. And you know what? It's a tension that's still very much with us today.
I mean, try to picture the scene. It's the end of World War I. The old world of these powerful empires and monarchs, it's just gone, literally wiped off the map. In their place is just this giant question mark. All these new countries had to experiment, to try and build entirely new governments from the ruins.
And for a little while, there was this incredible burst of optimism. People were inspired by leaders like U.S. President Woodrow Wilson, and the big idea was that democracy was the answer. This was going to be the path to a brand new, more peaceful world, one that would be free from the kind of horror that had just torn the continent to pieces.
Okay, so what did this new democratic dream actually mean in practice? Well, at its core, it's a simple but really powerful concept. The power belongs to the people. They get to decide their own future by choosing who governs them.
So this promise translated into a few key things. It meant having a parliament with multiple political parties all competing for your vote. It meant that ordinary citizens finally had the right to vote. And crucially, it meant you'd have your individual rights protected, things like freedom of speech. That was the ideal anyway.
But, and this is a big but, that beautiful promise quickly slammed right into a much harsher reality. People's faith in this new system started to crack, and it happened a lot faster than anyone expected.
So, what was the issue? Well, having all these different parties often just led to constant arguments and gridlock. Nothing was getting done. You have to remember, for many of these nations, this was their very first try at democracy. They didn't have years of tradition to fall back on. So instead of fixing the huge problems left by the war, the governments just looked weak. To the average person, it just seemed like a bunch of politicians were bickering while the country fell apart.
And right into this atmosphere of frustration stepped a new kind of leader, the strongman. They saw all the chaos and offered a totally different system, one we call authoritarianism, which puts order and state power above everything else. It was a very simple and, as it turns out, very tempting offer.
And this really shows you the choice people felt they had. On one side, you've got the messy, slow reality of democracy. On the other side, you've got this seductive promise of a strong leader who can bring unity, deliver quick solutions, and restore order. When your family is struggling to eat, that promise of strength can be incredibly appealing.
Let's break this down even more clearly. Democracy, you get elected governments, lots of parties arguing their points. Authoritarianism, you get one decisive leader and one party, that's it. Your role as a citizen changes from having a vote to, well, having no elections at all. Even the economy is different, a command economy where the state controls everything, not individuals. It was a trade-off, plain and simple, your freedom for what they promised would be stability.
And right when people were losing faith in democracy, two massive global crises hit. You could say these events were like throwing fuel on a fire, pushing whole nations away from democracy and straight into the arms of these strongmen.
First up, the economy. The Great Depression in 1929 was an absolute catastrophe. As people lost their jobs, their savings, their hope, their patience for political debate just ran out. Democratic governments seemed totally helpless, which just made them look even more incompetent.
The second crisis was ideological. It was a deep, powerful fear of communism. See, the Russian Revolution wasn't just some change of government over there. It introduced this radical new idea to the world, a classless society with no private property, all achieved through violent revolution. So the creation of the Soviet Union sent a shockwave of absolute panic across the rest of Europe.
And just look how quickly it all happened. In only 5 years, Russia went from a huge empire ruled by a czar to the world's very first communist state, the USSR, which was forged in a horribly bloody civil war. This wasn't some far-off idea in a book anymore. It was a real, powerful, and expanding force.
And you can see exactly why this fear was so strong. For the rich and the business owners, it was a direct threat to their wealth and status. For many others, it was a threat to their religion, their traditions, their entire way of life. This fear became so intense that people became willing to support extremist leaders, anyone who promised to take tough action and stop communism, whatever it took.
So the really crucial point here is that all that optimism from right after the war, it completely evaporated. The dream of building a peaceful, democratic world was just crushed by economic desperation and ideological fear. The priority shifted from these lofty ideals to just simple survival.
Ultimately, it all came down to this. People wanted security and stability more than anything else. And authoritarian leaders, guys like Mussolini in Italy and Hitler in Germany, they promised to deliver exactly that. Their rise to power was paved by the failures of democracy and the overwhelming anxieties of the time.
And all of this leaves us with a critical question, one that is just as relevant today as it was a century ago. When things get tough, when the future seems uncertain, what are people willing to trade away for the promise of order and stability? And what is the true cost of that choice?